Kevin Cochrane, welcome to Chief Outsiders Growth Talks.
Thanks so much, Mark. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So lots of businesses right now are focused on creating custom LLMs that enable all kinds of different customer experiences. And all that focus on creation ignores the deployment, which is where Vultr lives. So to get us kicked off, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and Vultr.
Great. So again, Mark, so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Kevin Cochrane, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Vultr. Vultr is the world's largest privately held independent cloud platform. Vultr offers full stack cloud compute. Full stack cloud compute is the best of cloud native engineering. All of your core CPU compute, managed database, managed Kubernetes, networking, storage, etc., married to your full GPU stack for all of your generative AI initiatives. That's all of your GPU optimized compute plans, networking, storage for both training, tuning, and production inference. Vultr also offers and is the only cloud platform that offers full stack cloud compute across 32 data center regions, including top of the line NVIDIA GPUs to power all of your 2024 generative AI initiatives.
And that's a lot. And a lot, that's one of the things that, folks, I think, don't necessarily think about. They're worried about, the data quality, the training, the response. They're not really thinking about, okay, once it gets out there,
Right.
How do we optimize that? And you actually have to plan ahead for that.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Correct. Yeah, 2023 obviously was a seminal moment in the world of compute, right? For the very first time, with the release of NVIDIA's H100 processor, as well as the availability of new open source LLMs, we had kind of a cardinal moment where enterprise realized that they needed to start doing things differently, or else they'd be left behind. 2023 is what we'd like to characterize here at Vultr as kind of the art of the possible. It was getting individual teams to start exploring different open source LLMs, to start understanding how to think differently about core operational processes, core customer experiences, and start investigating possibilities for leveraging open source LLMs for production applications. Now, 2024 is going to be demonstrably different. 2024 is going to be the first time that organizations need to move from the art of the possible to start realizing actual outcomes. And in 2024, the first kind of generative AI powered applications are going to start being put into production use. And Mark, to your point, this means we need to think very differently. We need to think very differently about how we approach our engineering efforts. We need to think very differently about how we approach managing data. And we need to think very differently our approach to how we actually industrialize continuous innovation and continuous delivery of the new generative AI applications. So, Mark, if I may, let's actually go up, unpeel each of those points. So first, on the engineering side, is we need to get this right. So we can't just move fast and break things.
Right.
Okay. That whole mantra of moving fast and breaking things in this generative AI world, we will really break things.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is we need to take a very organized, methodical, rigorous approach. And we need to take our core cloud strategy teams and our core cloud centers of excellence, and we need to build a platform engineering team. Every enterprise needs to build a platform engineering team. And that platform engineering team's job is to pre-build, pre-train all of the models, all of the application artifacts that can be safely used across all different business units and across all different regions. That platform engineering team not only needs to do the technical heavy lifting, because there's a lot of it, but they need to establish the guardrails and the governance of the actual code artifacts, model artifacts, and all of the policies and procedures about how they can be safely used within the enterprise. Obviously, the CISO needs to be heavily involved with
Sure.
the activities of that platform engineering team. Without a platform engineering team, we run a lot of risk for intending to do good, but inadvertently doing bad. The second part of it is we need to think very thoughtfully about the data. Now, I go back a long time in enterprise software. I go back to 1996. So I've seen a couple of different epochs of compute, right?
Yep.
Um, and the one that I always harken back to, let's harken back to two. If we knew in 1996 what we know today about things like, cyber criminals and so on and so forth, would we have done something very, very differently with the original architecture of the web and of email specifically? Yeah, we would have built security in from the get-go versus having to patch it again and again and again after the fact, right? Um, More recently, if we knew then what we know now at the dawn of the social media age on our mobile phones, would we have been done something very, very different in terms of how we use data, right? And I would argue we would do something very, very different because what we didn't realize is why we all were obsessed with becoming data-driven digital marketers and let's try to collect as much data and buy as much data as possible and monetize our customer interactions. We were trying to do the good thing because we wanted to deliver all these personalized experiences and these personalized outcome and be hyper aware of what pivots our customers were making in terms of their demand so we could better fulfill against their expectations. That's all good intentions, but we unleashed Pandora's box.
Yeah.
And we're only still now uncovering all of the complexities and all of the complications for trying to fix and address it, a decade later, right?
Right. Sure.
So with the data perspective, the risks of unintended consequence truly rise dramatically in a generative AI world. Okay. And so what we need to do is we need to think very thoughtfully upfront where where are we, what is the provenance of the data that we're sourcing, um, and how are we using it for training in a specific region, and what data do we need to tune our models, and where does that data need to live, and how can that be safely used? And there's a bunch of other stuff with respect to bias that we need to root out and so on and so forth. And I'm actually quite encouraged by the recent, and this might be controversial, by the recent EU Act.
Mm.
And I'm very heartened that they've moved so fast to start establishing a policy framework
Yeah.
for better management of data and risk with respect to your generative AI models. But where this really matters for us here at Vultr specifically is in this 2023, this whole art of the possible. Everyone just rushed to get H100s and set up large scale training clusters in North America and use as much data as possible. That, move fast and break things attitude's got to stop, because if you're an enterprise, you have proprietary data that needs to be adhere to local compliance regulations, and you have to be very careful what data you're training on, what
Right.
data are you tuning with, and then where are you doing production inference, um, and that all needs to be globally accessible. Okay, because if you're a large healthcare provider, or a large pharmaceutical firm, and you want to start doing some model training on clinical data, well, if it's in the UK and you're using UK patient data, you better be doing that in the UK. I'm sorry.
Right.
So even if it's not today against the letter of the law, it's certainly against the spirit of where we're going to be going with regulation.
Right.
So you better get this right up front. And this is where global footprint and global availability of top of the line NVIDIA GPUs matters, and that's where we here at Vultr obviously specialize in. And kind of the last aspect to it in terms of the continuous innovation and continuous delivery is, again, in the move to move fast and break things, people focus so much on the training aspect, but inference is the new web app.
Right.
Eventually, every single employee experience, every single customer experience will get rebuilt with generative AI at the core.
Right.
And in the past, 20 plus years, we've worked so hard to push compute closer and closer to the edge. In the original days of web applications, that was CDNs to cache your content. And now in today's day and age, you have serverless functions at the edge. Um, and suddenly we're going to run production inference of all of our worldwide models from a large training cluster in Santa Clara. Now,
Mm.
in what
Right.
world does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we need to think about the global architecture for distributing workloads for production inference close to where people live and work. So think of it like a serverless infrastructure for your generative AI models. And we need to think and plan about that up front.
Right. And it's, like you said at one point in a different conversation, it is as fundamental as the move from on-prem to the cloud.
100%.
That's how I
100%.
think about this.
That's correct. Now, again, we've gone through several epochs, right? I remember the transition to client server way back in the early 90s, right? And that was a fundamental change in IT management, IT operations, executive leadership, so on and so forth, right?
Right.
Then there was a change, obviously, to the web, and that was a decade plus long change. As people started to reinvent and build out their portfolio of web applications and build all of the processes, the procedures, etc., around managing that portfolio and managing the delivery of that portfolio.
Yeah.
And the cloud as well, another 10-year cycle of reinventing to understand how to get you know greater economy and greater agility, leveraging at first just core cloud compute and later ancillary cloud services. So we're at another 10-year cycle.
Mm.
And with each 10-year cycle, we have to think about our organizational structure. In this particular case, we need to reinvent our cloud center of excellence. We need to put in place a platform engineering team. We have to reinvent culture. So the culture from cloud, I would argue, was like move fast, break things, from the early days.
Yeah.
Like that culture's got to change. We need to be a little bit more diligent on specifically the data and how we're managing and how we're leveraging this to ensure that our good intents realize good outcomes with minimal bad side effects, bad externalities, I should say. Um, and we also need to reinvent all of our processes. So, the whole generative AI stack requires different processes for, ensuring integrity, ensure mitigating risk, checking providence, managing security. We have to reinvent all of our DevSecOps processes in order to accommodate these new models. And of course, it's going to change the way we manage our cloud infrastructure and our data centers, because the entire storage network and compute architecture are fundamentally very radically different. This is where cloud vendors that specialize in configuring and setting up and managing on-demand infrastructure of an entirely new compute stack like Vultr are there to help enterprises that are embarking on this journey in 2024.
So, if I'm a CEO and I'm thinking, okay, we've got to make this shift from the art of the possible to the
Yeah.
real world and real results. Where do I start, or how do I know if I'm on the right track?
Right. It's excellent question. I mean, and there's basically three basic buckets where I would argue that enterprises need to get started in 2024. Uh, First, there's core operational bucket. Like, what can you do today to enhance operational efficiency? And operational efficiency can come in two different forms. It can come in the form of, better automating core production processes, or number two, better automating core employee processes, right? So there's an operational bucket, right? A second bucket is just a pure analytics bucket. How can you get better insights, make smarter decisions? The big promise of machine learning from way back in the day, right?
Mhm.
And then there's a third bucket, which is the reinvention of your customer experience. Now, what I would argue is all three of those buckets, okay, you're going to have to build a roadmap, right? So define a North Star of where you want to be across those three vectors in kind of a 5-year time horizon, and then actually put in place kind of a crawl, walk, run model for where you see different phases of pioneering new advancements across those three vectors. Okay. And then lastly, be very, very concrete in 24. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Deliver one project against each of them. Pick
Mm.
one project and operationalize it through a platform engineering team so you can scale it in other vectors. So what I would say is, again, make sure you have that North Star, make sure you change the organization, make sure you change the culture, make sure you think through the policies and procedures, build a crawl, walk, run model, start small, get 3 projects underneath your belt. Now, on the operational side, again, some of this might be as so simple as, better automating IT service management, right? It could be that simple to start. And then on the customer experience side, it could just be better optimizing, customer support, ticket handling, and response. It doesn't have to be, a groundbreaking,
Right.
transformational day one. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of guardrails to put in place. There's
Clearly.
a lot of policies and procedures that need to be ironed out. So
Yeah.
sometimes starting with simpler applications that deliver immediate tangible value that help you understand what you're dealing with and where you can take it next is actually the right way to begin.
Hmm. Are there any sort of case studies or success stories that come to your mind when think about how, the Vultr's approach to AI cloud solutions have really, supported a business strategy in their growth?
Yeah, I mean, we can take a look at a couple of examples. So one of the more recent examples that I came across that actually warmed my heart was an example of a healthcare company going through clinical trial data to
Mm.
better understand how to target gene discovery for rare diseases, so they could be more specific in how they address the needs of specific population. So in this particular case, I don't know if I can name all of the details of it, but it's a rare disease that affects
Mhm.
a particular segment of the population, and the disease can be very, very debilitating, very, very difficult to treat. And you know the treatment for each individual is highly dependent upon a variety of different
Mm.
characteristics and so on and so forth. So it's very challenging. So one of the things that they've been able to do, leveraging generative AI, is to actually go through the process of analyzing all of the healthcare records for all of the patients that have been seen in hospitals, how often they've been seen in the hospital, the severity of their symptoms, the type of their symptoms, the duration of the symptoms, etc. And then based on very sophisticated analysis of all of those different vectors, we're able to start also identifying different ways that they could actually map uh, the actual delivery of a certain drug to actually best accommodate the specific needs of an individual patient. So it's a combination of doing the genomics research, uh, coupling that with population sampling, and basically understanding how to drive greater efficacy in terms of healthcare outcomes, in terms of the actual drug delivery, to better match each individual patient with a very unique plan to manage their systems and prevent reoccurrence. So that's one that I just came up with yesterday, learned about yesterday, and it was like, this is outstanding. I mean, this is the
Yeah,
promise that we want.
that's it.
Um,
That's been.
that's
Yeah.
absolutely the promise we want. It's basically, the something that would have taken thousands of years to go through
Right.
and identify for each individual,
Yeah.
their unique genetic pattern matched against their unique systems to understand the exact optimal delivery method for this particular drug. It's like
Wow.
it would have never happened before, but now we've actually been able to accelerate that and actually do that at scale in a way we've never been able to think about before.
Wow. It's a great glimpse into, how transformative it's going to be. People, like to talk about AI as, this incredibly transformative technology wave. But I think the actual applications like that we're just
Yeah.
beginning to see.
Correct. I mean, it's going to be personalized
Yeah.
healthcare. It's going to be personalized medicine. I mean, at the end of the day, getting seen by your doctor. I mean, we're going to have personal digital assistants that can actually help us walk through our systems and symptoms and help us on a path to recovery or something like that.
And with all due respect to our doctor friends, maybe they'll be on time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So they're very busy people. I mean, they're saving lives. So
Right.
it's very important. Yeah, we're going to get into a very interesting world very, very quickly, and we're just starting to see the possibilities here. And again, while the possibilities are exciting, let's make sure we do this safely. And
Right.
sometimes doing things safely means taking a more deliberate approach, maybe even a slower approach,
Mm.
um, but making certain we actually, only achieve the outcomes we intend, and again, don't move too fast that we break things that
Right.
can't be unbroken.
It's good. It's good advice. Very good advice for this next wave. So I guess, are there any lessons that you've learned in your journey with Vultr that might be valuable for the CEOs who are listening to this and just embarking on their AI transformation journey?
Yeah. I think the biggest lesson learned is that, remember, we're at the dawn of a new age of compute, right? So this is a 10-year cycle.
Right.
And what that means is that we can't necessarily just continue to do things the way that we've done them before. So I think that there is oftentimes what I hear kind of a fallacy of, oh, we've always just, leveraged Amazon. So we're an Amazon shop. So we're just going to use them for everything they provide. Okay. Um, what we like to say here in Vultr is, well, we don't want to wind up in 10 years with what we call the $10 trillion paradox, right? Now, in the core world of cloud compute, there was a very famous article written by Andreessen Horowitz that talked about the $1 trillion paradox, which is the benefits of the cloud oftentimes were not realized because the high cost of cloud compute, where people were realizing that the cost of operations was exorbitantly high and preventing them from scaling profitably. And oftentimes, for certain businesses, it was cheaper to actually build out their own infrastructure and repatriate their workloads from the cloud, just because the cost structure was, prohibitively expensive as they continued to grow. And what we like to say is, well, that problem can get magnified tenfold in this new generative AI age. So what we like to say is, you got to be open to thinking differently. And that being open to thinking differently isn't just reinventing core operational processes, your core customer experience and how you do all of your analytics and business planning. It also is, who are the partners that you work with?
Yeah.
What is the structure of your platform engine, your cloud team, i.e. a platform engineering team? How is it that you approach managing data? How is it that you approach managing the infrastructure required to run these things in the most cost-effective, most performant manner? So again, every wave of, you know, innovation and compute, there's always people say, oh, we'll just continue to do things the way we did. We'll just, you know, tack on this new initiative and
Right.
we'll succeed. No, 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 no. It's a seminal sea change, right? You have to radically rethink the entire model, um, and be open to exploring, you know, alternative vendors that can actually help you get there. And then this is where we here at Vultr play to help people that need to think differently and want to think differently, and help them today get up and running with the market-leading compute infrastructure for generative AI applications.
Wow. It's really good advice for folks that to not treat this next wave like the last wave, and to
Correct.
recognize you're at a completely different moment. So helpful. Thank you, Kevin. This has been a great conversation. Really appreciate you joining us today. Anything else you want to share with our viewers before we sign off?
So first, Mark, thank you so much for having me. And the only thing I would also say is, for organizations that are looking to embark on their generative AI journey, it's a very exciting time. There's tremendous innovations happening on a daily basis in the open source community. And just reach out to us here at Vultr. We're here to help.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. Great to see you.
Thanks so much, Mark. Great speaking with you again. Take care.